Now, are VCs all different? What do you think, Andrin?
Different. I guess, look at us, right? Middle-aged men in blue jackets, trying to wear jeans, jackets.
Trying to wear jeans. I see them quite nicely on there.
Look, I think there are things that probably we all say. We all like to add value to our portfolio companies. We all like to invest in great management teams. We all like to back billion-dollar businesses. Having said that, I do think there are meaningful differences in what we focus on, in, I guess, when we like to get involved, how much we like to get involved. So I do think there are differences, but of course, at the end of the day, we'd like to make money as well.
So, Bo, you have a big difference, right? You are a so-called corporate VC, right? You're part of Nokia.
We're not part of Nokia.
At least you're called Nokia.
We have one LP, which is Nokia. And we have
How
Nokia
much does
now.
that account of your fund? Is it public?
Well, it's 100%.
That's all.
It's one LP.
Okay.
No, I think just on the differences, right? I think, of course, all VCs say the same things, right? At the end of the day, what we tell the entrepreneurs is you need to go out and do your due diligence, right? Check with other people that have worked with us as a firm. And particularly, of course, it's always down to the individual partner as well, right? You need to figure out, are these people that you want to work with? It's not just about the money, right? It's about value add, but also are these persons that I want to live with, right? Because you can't fire your investors, right?
You can't fire your investors.
No, it's hard, right? Unless you buy them out, and that's expensive, right?
Andrin is one of the internet entrepreneurs who switched and made it to an investor. You are running a fund together with your partner, Greg, called Piton. It's a bit hard to pronounce, although we know each other for many, many years. I still have my difficulties. Very, very not steep learning curve, this guy. And Bo runs, obviously, Nokia Growth Ventures. Now, David, when we met the first time, and in Israel, I believe it was, and I told you we are going to bring NOAH to San Francisco.
Correct.
Which we did once. And we realized, oh man, the world is very different there in terms of the conference market. And it was very nice. You said, bring them all to my house. I said, well, David, we have like 80 speakers from Europe. We're all traveling together and want to show Americans how it's getting done with the internet. He said, I have a big house. So I saw the guys joking. Then, like a week before, his assistant sent us an email, what do you guys want to eat? So we spent a lovely late afternoon, evening at your place. I want to say thank you for that.
Pleasure.
Because normally, when Americans make promises and say, come by my house, they never remember, right? But David not only invited me, but also the 70, 80 speakers we had. I want to say thank you for that. Now,
we wish you to come back again. Don't just come to San Francisco once. You need to be frequent visitors.
Okay, we put your house on Airbnb at zero cost, and I'm sure there will be plenty of liquidity. Now, you are one of those guys who are kind of at a lot of places. You started in the US, Blumberg Capital.
Yes.
You spent a lot of time in Israel, and you do like Germany. You've done many deals in Germany. Tell us, why are you so active in so many different places? We have this rule at NOAH, no deal longer than 4 hours flight to the company. You don't have that rule.
Well, you just asked if all VCs are the same. And I think it's more like artists. Artists are, they're all doing art, but there's so many expressions of art. And yes, we have certain institutional rules about what makes good investments, but the stage, the style, the geographical reach, the strategic interests, the domains, and then, as you say, the partners and what they're good at, what simpatico of a board compatibility they bring in terms of personality and style, all very different. So you as entrepreneurs, the good thing is that we're not all alike. Thank God. If we were all alike, it wouldn't work for you because you have different needs, we have different needs. The hard part is matching. That's where folks like Marco, who knows everybody in the world, come in because they can help connect you with the right folks at the right time. And why did we go beyond Silicon Valley? We know that there are a lot of brains and great talents outside of Silicon Valley. That's an obvious thing. Sometimes in Silicon Valley, people get so arrogant and provincial that they think everything is there. We know that that's not true. We've seen great unicorns, great companies, great entrepreneurs, great funds get built other places. I just saw the statistics the other day. Out of the 142 unicorns, quote unquote, that are around today, 88 are in the US. That means 60-something are outside. So there's a lot of places you can grow good companies. So we're looking for them. We chose to go first to Israel because we thought it was closest to Silicon Valley, and we had ties there, natural ties. Then we've expanded to Germany and Canada. We're open to really everywhere. We would do deals in Scandinavia. We would do deals really anywhere we could find them if we can add value. But we know that we're limited. We can't do things, for example, I'll put our limits. We can't really help you a lot in India or China. So you should go to a great firm that's there. But if you're looking to come into the United States, that's where I think we can really help. And a lot of people have that on their pathway.
And people love you in Berlin, I know.
Yeah.
So, Andrin, you have focus, and Andrin made the conscious decision, although he could, he only raises a little bit of capital because he's saying that keeps me disciplined, that keeps me focused, and I guess Piton has the focus to invest into marketplaces. Now, tell us a little bit about your investments. What are the big names we can associate to you? I think you recently had a great access, a company which was on stage here, and they were so fast that we couldn't get them as an M&A client. I read the headline that they got sold. Tell us a little bit about your track record.
Thank you. As you say, marketplaces are very much our thing. I think we started investing in marketplaces a long time ago. I first really started to focus on it almost 10 years ago. My partner Greg actually had his first job in a marketplace back in the late 80s when it was still in a paper format, but a marketplace nevertheless. And I guess it's the kind of phenomenon that goes beyond cycles. It works year in, year out. It's been around for thousands of years. We think it will keep growing. We're very fortunate to have had associations with some great marketplaces. Prior to setting up Piton, Greg was heavily involved in Betfair, Auto Trader in Canada. Before that, I was involved in what ultimately became a successful sale of QXL Ricardo, or the Allegro part in Poland, to Naspers. In the current portfolio, I guess some guys that have been at the conference here this year are Auto1, the used car marketplace out of Berlin, where we have been involved since the Series A, led to Series B. FanDuel, a daily fantasy sports business, which we think have strong marketplace characteristics out of now the US, but starting actually in Europe as well. Take It Easy, a food delivery marketplace, I think was on stage here earlier as well. Doc Planner, great medical marketplace out of Poland. A number of jobs marketplaces, a number of physical goods marketplaces. I think the interesting thing about this phenomenon is that you see it across sectors, you see it across goods, services, but it comes back to a fundamental concept of liquidity, which we think has commonality across all these things. So we like to specialize. We think it gives us unique insights into what we should be investing in, but hopefully some of that also transfers over to the entrepreneurs once we have invested.
So, Bo, how many LPs do you have?
One.
And the companies you invest in, the nature of their activity, is it important that there's kind of an angle with the telecommunication industry?
Well, so the way we work is really as an arm's length investor, and over the years we've had the luxury to really make our own decisions based on what we believe are good financial return metrics. We've been around for 10 years, so this is actually our 10 years anniversary this year. We have been through 3 CEOs and through 3 CFOs, and anybody who has followed a little bit the tech press have seen probably Nokia has done the biggest pivot in the history of pivots, right? Today is a very focused networks company, but a very large company. The reason that we have been able to stick around is also the model, right? A lot of corporates confuse sort of strategic financial, right? And we really believe that if you want to have sustainability as a venture firm, you need to have a very clear financial remit. That's the way that you stick around. Otherwise, you are there for the next CEO, the next board, whatever, right? So strategics often change their mind. So we work at an arm's length, but we work very collaboratively across business units.
What's your investment focus? What kind of companies are you looking for?
So typically it has been very much mobile first, right? If you go back a few years today, it's very much around the Internet of Things in different verticals. We are a global team, right? So we invest in China, in India, in the US, and here in Western Europe. We are 13 investment professionals, and typically it's a growth stage investment model. So,
nice. So David, you're the US guy here. You see a lot. And I want to ask you a question as an entrepreneur. If I want to grow NOAH and I want to raise capital, and I have...
Are you fundraising?
Pardon me?
Are you fundraising?
Can talk about this behind stage. No. If I want to raise capital and don't raise the prices for the conference, shall I raise a little bit, prove a concept, and then raise a lot more? Or shall I try to grab the great market opportunity and my current passion, as we have heard from everyone on stage, that this is key for investors to look at, and raise as much capital as possible and have a higher dilution now versus a potential lower dilution if I do a two-step deal?
Right. I don't think there's one answer that fits all solutions, so I'm not on the side of raise as much as you can all the time. I think I like to not make the VC controlling the money and pushing it into you because we need to invest so much, and I see big funds sometimes do that to entrepreneurs. I'd rather have you pull it as you need it and come to the right funding sources for the right times. I can't get into your brain to understand how the risk-reward trade-offs are for you. Some people worry enormously about dilution. Other people worry enormously about running out of money, and so they want to raise a lot more, and they don't mind the dilution because they never, ever want to run out for their big expansion plans. And who knows when the next crash will happen. This business, the event business, is highly cyclical. I've seen event businesses that have been extraordinarily successful go bankrupt because the market turned after the 2000 crash in the tech world. The tech, things went down. Right now, it's a great time for conferences. Money 2020 just sold for $100 million. I don't know how old they were, but that was a...
2020, they're minus 5 years.
What, how long is it?
Minus 5 years, 2020.
5 years, and they sold for $100 million, the whole
business
conference.
plan.
It's amazing. So these things are cyclical.
Who bought them?
I don't know.
Okay. No, let's take a few questions from the audience because I'm getting a little bit tired after 2 days and a racket party.
There's a question right there.
Iran.
But
There was a
before
question
we
right
do
there.
that, and you all think about your question, and no one is allowed to leave like in school before the one question was asked. Valuations. I'm really confused. All the time I got a different answer. I asked so many people on stage, is it overvalued, undervalued? Oliver said we are undervalued, some people say we are overvalued, then the smart guys say the right stories are rightly valued, so we don't really know. But I want to have a bit more reality here, a bit more strength. Bo, you are like a...
We invest in across the world, right? So the pricing environment tend to be a lot more exuberant in US and China, meaning that good companies get bid up very, very quickly, and by any normalized metric get very, very expensive. Europe has a bit more stability in the pricing environment, but again, you see pockets of exuberance, and clearly you see pockets of companies that by any rational means is overvalued. At the same time, it's also a market where capital is not the scarcity. Any good entrepreneur has capital available, right? And it's not gonna last, right? So as an investor, we feel it's a daunting time. So you need to think very carefully about how you build your portfolio, right? Having the right spread, also on the risk side, and at the same time, you're very busy also exiting companies, right? It's a good time to exit. And again, we don't know how long it will last, but we need to make sure that we also liquidate good companies into the markets as we can. So we feel it's a very pricey environment today.
And I think you have to parse between...
So you say, just to cut a long story short, it's expensive.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think you have to parse between stages of venture. The late stage are more highly valued. They've had a higher inflation, about 4x in the last 10 years, at least US data. And you're starting to see now IPOs going public at well below the last private price. That shows that that's a very
I want to talk, sorry for interrupting, but I have a very, very important question because it affects my job. So it seems to me that these US companies who show us bankers how to raise money at terms which I wouldn't even imagine are achievable, they do something right, right? And the Uber, this U, and you have to be in the U, in the club, and there's so many funds invested, and are you in, are you out, oh, when did you get in? It seems to me there is like this ability of US entrepreneurs to convince people with big pockets of money to join a party. Now, how we in Europe, how can we learn from that? Usually, if they do use bankers, they just give them the Rolodex and they make some calls, and it's like a, you know, we did a deal with WeWork. It was like us pitching to them, explaining to them the NOAH platform will help you. We invested for a client of us on our behalf. What can we learn from the US entrepreneurs like, you know, Brian from Airbnb and Uber, etc.? How do they get this done? Do they use presentation and models? And
I'm not quite sure I'm clear on the question. You're saying, how do you get into those kinds of deals?
how do you get these expensive, how do you explain these expensive pre-IPO valuations?
Okay.
I mean, normally private equity, in my world when I grew up at Lehman Brothers, you know, they have higher IRR requirements like a pension fund. A pension fund wants 4 or 5%, they're happy. KKR or Hellman Friedman, they want 30%. Or family office. How do they get these valuations done?
Well, I'm going to go at this in a different way. I'm going to just sort of explain to the audience why this has happened. The cost of an IPO has gone up quite significantly since I was an equity analyst 20 years ago at T. Rowe Price. And companies are going later and for much higher valuations. Now, the big equity buyers like T. Rowe Price, Wellington, Fidelity, they can't get enough on the IPO offerings anymore, so they're going earlier. Now, that's good for early-stage entrepreneurs and VCs because it provides another path for liquidity. So it's not quite exactly an answer to your question, but the market is finding its own solution to these problems that I think government is generally causing by disrupting the equity IPO markets. So you get late-stage folks coming in that are traditionally public market players and now wanting to get onto the private market. So it means, on the supply-demand, there are a lot more investors for late-stage pre-public companies. And that's why sometimes you get the toppiness. Does that make sense and resonate?
I think it makes sense. I think for me, there is that explanation, which is kind of the capital markets explanation. And then there is the explanation of how some of these underlying markets are developing, where I do think there's a tendency to concentrate around a few big winners.
Winner
right?
take all.
I think that's
Yeah.
not necessarily the case in all industries and in all business models. And I think to the earlier question around valuation, I think there's a bit of a tendency of attaching massive valuations to kind of big companies, no matter whether they're going to be a kind of one big winner or just one of many. And that I think is probably where, for me, exuberance comes in. I have total understanding why people will pay a very big price, and arguably a very exuberant price, for something that is likely going to be a global winner in a very big market. I'm struggling when people do that for a company that is likely going to be in a very competitive space with very limited, a very limited competitive moat around their economic castle. And I think that's a little bit where I'm struggling. I guess there's one additional point, which is that, of course, people need to recognize that a lot of these rounds happen with significant structure around them. So they're not just kind of straight equity rounds.
Okay.
And early stage has not suffered the same inflation as the late stage.
Why do you think that is?
Because you can't get an auction going generally in the imperfect information level of early stage. Whereas at the late stage, everybody knows Uber, everybody knows Airbnb. And they even have a retail cachet, people, the family offices, everybody wants to get in.
And people know and use the products. Now, before these guys raise their hands, I want you to raise your hands. Do you invest into venture capital rounds where the valuation is priced at a discount as a convertible to the next round? Hands up if you do.
We do.
It depends.
Yep.
Have you done it?
Yes.
Okay. It's good to know. Have you ever fired a CEO in your portfolio?
Yes.
As a board, we have. We don't like to. We hate it.
You have to do it, right?
Have to, sometimes.
Was the CEO better than the CEO before?
What's that?
Was it a good thing to do? Did it save the company? Was the CEO better than the CEO before?
Most of the time, yes. Sometimes nothing could have saved
That I
it.
call value add, right?
I would say it's always a bad thing when it happens. I think it's very rare that you can ultimately do better than a founder-led business. So we always love to invest in founder-led businesses, but I think it's one of those things where if you actually have to actively get to that point, it's almost certainly a bad thing for everyone involved, no matter what happens after.
As a counterexample, I was the holdout. The whole board wanted to get rid of the founder. I was his first investor. I stuck with him and fought and fought and fought. Finally, I got overruled. It was the right decision. And the CEO is happy that we replaced him.
So I think that's the point, right? When you reach that conclusion, it's often 6 months too late, right? It is a very, as investors, it's a very, very difficult conclusion. Of course, there's a big difference between a founder-led or a professionally hired CEO, but more often when you reach the conclusion, you are procrastinating, right? It takes you too long to get there. You should cut much earlier, because once you start to have that sense, it's very likely that it's the right thing to do. Now, is it going to ultimately save the business? That's not a given, right? But it often is much too late once you have decided.
Now, let's go back to the practical questions of life. When you invest into entrepreneurs, do you check their Facebook profile? Be honest.
LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter.
The whole Big Brother thing, right?
It has come to bite people in the butt.
So if I want to raise money for NOAH, I should take off the photos from last night. Okay, guys.
You sell entertainment, it's okay.
Okay, by the way, we have another party happening later, and you decide how big it will be. There will be networking drinks after this. We take a few more questions from the audience, because you said they have better questions than me, which is right.
That.
So I will make a flitzer here from one to the other. Oh, there's Aaron again. No jokes, please.
It's burning in my body to ask this question because, you know, I'm a little bit provocative sometimes and I enjoy it as much as Marco does. And we all know the glamorous part of our job as a venture capitalist. We sit on piles of money, we decide whom to give it to, but people tend to forget that we have to go through a nightmare once in 3 or 4 years when we do our own fundraising. And I had done it for 7 times already in my life. And I know it's a real nightmare. People don't know about it and don't like to talk about it.
Aaron, it's Q&A.
Yeah, my question is, do you see? Okay, why is it a nightmare? Because many institutional and other investors that sit on trillions say no to venture capital. And if they do say yes, they are so careful in their second or third fund, subject to X conditions. Do you see any difference recently in your fundraising efforts comparing to the years before?
Success breeds success.
Okay.
As you do better, they come more easily.
Yeah, I think there's obviously we have a particular relationship, but if you generate returns for your investors, it's a lot easier discussion always, right? When you have maybe struggled, you have hit a bad fund, it's always difficult. But venture as an asset class, right? You go back to the ice age of 2001 to 2006, right? It has changed, right? There is a lot more interest to get into venture as an asset class.
And the hard part is also, we're not very trendy. Some funds are able to raise because X flavor du jour of venture is very trendy, and but then the hard part for them is following on, because that trend may go out. Like, I hope I'm offending nobody, but like clean tech was super hot for 10 minutes, and then not so much. So I think that's a risky way to raise money, is on a super little narrow subject.
Okay, more questions, please. Oh, there's a question coming. And if you don't dare to ask a question, it's all NOAH taking friction out of the model. You can whisper the question in my ear, and I will be your voice. You whisper? Okay, look, it works. Whisper. It's one of my favorite questions. Why are there so few women in venture capital? They are kind of charming individuals, right? So they can lure entrepreneurs normally, no?
There are more and more. I think that's the
Maybe we should ask the women in the audience.
In our firm, it's actually majority women, just to be clear. It's true.
Well done. Yes.
That's true.
You don't know what's underneath.
Poor judgment.
I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay.
Money, by the way. David, you must love art.
I do, of course.
We
Can I
need.
talk to you after the panel?
You
Of
want
course.
to be on stage?
But you need to answer the question.
Okay, why don't you sit there next to Andrin? He doesn't bite, although he's from Switzerland.
Not usually, no.
Go there.
Hi, greetings.
Okay, I would like to give you the microphone and answer the question of the question. Since I start NOAH, we always get under pressure. Marco, you are not nice. There are not enough women on stage. I've called every woman I know who should be on stage. One third has a scheduling conflict. The other third doesn't want to talk about stuff because it's secret. And then there are like a few who come or want to come, and sometimes they have a plane problem or this or that. We are really, really, really trying hard. So I have two questions for you. One is why there are not more women in our industry, not just VC, by the way, because also startups. And second, and this is really important because the first will take a long time to fix, but the second, how do we get them on stage? There must be something we do wrong.
Thank you for putting me on the spot, Marco. I really appreciate it. I think it comes down to confidence. I think women
You have confidence.
No, I don't have confidence. And I push myself actively, to be honest, because I think confidence is number one. And it is male-dominated. It's a boys' club.
Is it really? I'm going to dispute that. What do you mean? We will invest in a purple, green, lesbian Eskimo in a wheelchair. We don't care what they look like. We don't care their gender, their religion, who they sleep with. None of it is relevant. We only want you to be a great entrepreneur. And we've backed women, and we have women in our firm, our investment team. So I hate to say this, but I reject this issue about fake diversity and lack of diversity in the industry because I don't think this is a very biased industry.
So
I
that
think
sounds
we're
like a
pretty
chicken
damn open.
That sounds like a
And
chicken and egg problem.
Well, I'm
here,
going to give you an
right?
example. 20 years ago, there were no Asians, very many, in Silicon Valley. Now, you can't find a company without a huge number of Asian, Chinese and Indian, and I'm being generic, but at major leadership levels all over the industry and in the VC industry. So, they sort of surge through in waves, starting with MBA, engineering schools, entrepreneurship, and coming in. And I think it's just demand. If you want it, it will happen. But I don't think there are glass barriers to you.
Who has invested into a female entrepreneur?
Lots.
What's going on in Scandinavia? You're so
I don't
women-friendly.
know. I'm sorry, we can't point to it. But it wasn't by choice, right? Again, I mean, it's like David, right?
What would you do when a woman comes with a big belly, with a business plan, and is asking for a VC round?
That's hard.
Would you ask a question if she's pregnant?
That's the worst question you can ask a
woman. Is that
woman.
discrimination? Or is it just reality we have to deal with?
I don't think it's only about the issue of getting pregnant. I mean, if
No, but she's pregnant. She is pregnant. She's not getting pregnant. She is pregnant. She walks through. Did she get the timing wrong?
But here's the answer. The self-aware entrepreneur will answer that question themselves. They will say, here's my plan. And we'll listen respectfully, and if it makes sense, we'll fund them. Is that fair?
I think
it was Marco's question.
I think it's very fair.
I think women tend to be more risk averse, and that's another
Interesting.
issue.
But sometimes, as a woman, to find a very risk-taking husband is also a way of taking risk, right?
That's not my goal.
How can we, as NOAH, try to support the European digital ecosystem, and as far as we learn from you in the talks back and forth, you're doing okay. Could do better, we're doing okay. But where we certainly don't do okay, because we have a lot of criticism to get, and this was the second question, which we didn't answer, how can we get more women here?
I think you need to work together with women's associations. There are numerous associations here in the city.
Can you send me an email of all the ones I should work together with?
I would love, I will tweet you and I will email you as well.
Tweet, okay. Email is better. Tweets I don't really find so well.
No worries.
So complicated. There's some weird sign before. So hush.
Hashtag.
Hush. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You're relieved. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
By the way, you are courageous. Thank you.
Just while on that point, just remember how far we've come. When my dad graduated from law school, he would apply in San Francisco, this very Western civilized society, and there were law firms that say, that said Jews and Irish need not apply, let alone women, and let alone blacks, let alone gays, whatever. The world is advancing very fast on this front, and I think it's somewhat of a fake issue because it's going away, it's dissolving as a barrier, I hope.
And by the way, just to get any doubt out of the room, the concept of NOAH is a concept of partnership. And as you remember in the Bible, when the NOAH was built, there was a male and a female. So by definition, we love diversity on that topic. We just wait for lots of nice people to come and present their business, which are female. So encourage your friends, family, to present on our stage. Now, do you think we should have a quota, Andrin? A female quota?
I'm generally against quotas. I think I'm with David here. I think it's an issue that will resolve itself. I think as an industry, and I'm not just talking venture capital, I'm thinking about a truly open entrepreneurial ecosystem. I think it will resolve itself because it's just not commercial when you're essentially not letting the majority of the talent pool participate in value creation. I mean, it's just silly. So I don't think it has anything to do with an institutional bias, at least in the firms that I know and that I can see. I'm totally confident that as an issue, this will go away. I think every venture capitalist I know is more than happy to back an entrepreneur from any gender, any background. It's all about that magical combination of incredible ambition, probably a degree of delusion, and at the same time an ability to execute with a real attention to detail. I think that's all that matters.
I love to be a woman and be an entrepreneur. More questions, please. Here's one.
What should VCs do differently? I'd like to know from them.
Hey, does it work this? I think this is a question mainly for David.
Can you speak a bit up, please? It's a microphone.
Yeah, can everybody hear me? Okay,
Yes,
there
yeah.
you are. I'm sorry, this is a little bit of side effects of yesterday night. But the basic question is, a couple of weeks ago in Madrid, the South Summit, a lot of interesting talks, and there was one guy from Silicon Valley that basically his argument was something like, okay, you know, guys, while you've been looking at what is the next cool app that's going to break through, in the Valley, we've been looking very seriously at biotechnology, synthetic biology, and, you know, very, very, if you want, disruptive thoughts on what it can bring. And to the extreme, some of the claims were something like, okay, we can even redefine what a human being is because of the implication in terms of long expectancy, enhanced capability, so on and so forth. So I would like just to hear your thoughts on the gossips that you hear, or how people perceive, or how people are looking at this particular disruption in that specific and potentially highly impactful industries such as biotechnology.
Biotechnology and synthetic biology?
Yep.
Okay, so
Thank you.
we're an IT firm generally, so we haven't invested much, but we've done one. We've done a company out of Y Combinator called 20N. And one of the things that was attractive about it to us was it didn't have a lot of FDA risk because it was going after chemical creation through new pathways using genetic modification. So for example, creating acetaminophen not through oil and phenols, but through finding a gene in a fungus and fermenting it up in microbes and so on. So those are kinds of things that we thought were interesting. A lot of other VCs have a lot more experience in this. I will say this, I think it's going to change the world. I think synthetic biology is one of the great new areas for young entrepreneurs to work on. You might have more, your areas probably don't overlap there, but it's fruitful for promise.
Now, here's an interesting one. What can a German entrepreneur can learn from an Israeli? What can an Israeli entrepreneur can learn from an English? And what can an English one learn from a German? It's 3 questions. We have 3 people on the sofas. Who wants to take the first?
You first.
So it was what the German can learn from an Israeli.
Yes.
Sounds like a joke, but anyway. Go
Exactly.
exactly.
So look, we have a couple of investments in Israel, so we invested in Move It and
You invested in Move It. I just
Yes,
saw near
yes.
and was blown away.
He's a great guy, right? But he's not a prototypical Israeli entrepreneur, right? He doesn't have that in-your-face aggressiveness, which often is great because it really gets them places, right? And then you fly to Dresden, and you meet sort of a German entrepreneur. I made this machine. It works very well. We think it's very good, right? So it's, let's say, that in-your-face aggressiveness, which when you go to Israel, sometimes it's too much when you have them all at the same time like that. But individually, as entrepreneurs, of course, it gets them places, right? So I do think that I'm Danish originally, so we're not that different from the Germans, if you will. And I do think that sort of in-your-face aggressiveness really with that energy wanting to go places, that a lot of the German entrepreneurs could really learn from that.
So not only have passion, but show the passion.
150% show the passion.
Andrin, what can the English learn from the Germans?
Well, I'm going to just ignore your question, Marco. I hate to do that, but I actually think...
Fight off for this guy, please.
Exactly. I think it's interesting that over the last 5 or 10 years, I think the kind of cultural prejudices I would have probably had as well, that are kind of in line with what Bo just talked about here, have largely disappeared from at least the companies we invest in. I think there's a layer of entrepreneurs that actually are kind of almost cross-culturally similar in a way. I think we have a lot of super aggressive entrepreneurs in Germany, and aggressive in a very positive way. We have super aggressive guys in the UK. I think that has very little to do with what your passport says, and has all to do with kind of your mindset. And I genuinely think those kind of historic barriers that are probably built up by education have been largely torn down.
By the way, I recently met an entrepreneur from Silicon Valley, which was introduced to me by friends from Ukraine, Riedel. And I asked him where he lives. He said, I don't know. I'm here in a hotel. And I said, but where do you live? Where's home? And he said, I hop from place to place by using Airbnb. He doesn't know where he goes. He's a floater of society. Yet he's working...
Where does he pay tax?
No idea. What did you ask?
Where does he pay tax?
What is his main task?
Pay tax.
Where does he pay tax? I know in Switzerland you don't know the tax question, but...
I think he is a human billboard for Airbnb. Because he wants to have a story to tell. Now,
the theme is important. You're saying that these entrepreneurs are becoming global.
He programmed a plugin for WordPress which allows you to admin your websites to your mobile phone while you're, believe it or not, traveling. So I found this quite extreme and never heard that. And he told me then, you know, Marco, you're wrong. He believes that in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, the sharing economy will be so advanced that 10% of the population share a car, share houses, share a job. Don't share wife, I guess. But what's your view on the sharing economy? I mean, in America, you
But
kind of...
can we answer the last question?
Yes, of course. Sorry,
The
we have so
last
much
question,
time.
just to say that it's showing by the data. The startups that we're backing, I'm sure this is true in your cases, they're no longer national. They're almost always born international. They have developers here, they have a marketing here, they have some CEO here. They're becoming transnational, and I'm seeing some of this similar thing. Now, I would say that the free markets, free peoples meme is going to be the future of the civilized world. And so those kind of characteristics, creativity, openness, transparency, challenging the status quo, is very important, and societies that are not open that way will lag behind in fostering entrepreneurship. You need rule of law, you need open capital markets. That's important. That's why some places are doing better. I think that one thing Israel has that's very unique in the world, and is that the bonding that you get out of the Israeli military training. And almost all of our best companies come from this elite units there where you...
It's secret. It's
secret
Nobody
units.
knows.
Yeah, nobody knows about that. That's a unique thing that's really helpful there. The great thing about the US entrepreneurs is they get one big unified market. That's helps them. The negative thing I think about Europeans is you're too modest. I would urge Europeans to stop being so modest. You're better than you say you are. And don't think locally. Think globally too. Israel has to think globally because they're so small. But if you're a nice German entrepreneur, a nice French entrepreneur, you think, I can get big in my own little region. No. Your competition is global. Don't think you can stay in your little nest. You have to think global in this venture-backed world.
Okay, one more question. There's one from a woman.
Is that fair?
Love it.
It's not actually a question.
Deutsche Börse.
I don't work for Deutsche Börse. It's a follow-up to the previous comment on involving more women. And basically, I would like to suggest or propose that there's some grouping of VCs or mentors that get together to mentor women in early stage startups, because I think that's the point of the curve where you need to have strong self-belief and mentorship. And I would imagine if we analysed the chart of where people fall off and failures at that stage, women would be quite high at that stage.
So you think that every VC should have a woman minister, like some contact person where women can go first before they hit the big male egomaniac people?
I think that's a step further to say every VC, but I think it would be good if an organisation were put together to actually support female entrepreneurs, whether it's, I think every VC may be a little bit unrealistic, but a board of people to put together to sponsor a mentor or mentee of different ages throughout the early stage startup journey.
There are some of these kinds of organizations.
Idea.
Certainly in Silicon Valley, there are a number of this, at least 3 that I know of. Astia, and I can't remember the names of all of them. They're mostly women-led organizations that do self-help and support, but men like me are welcome and encouraged to join, and we should.
Okay, we have time for one more question. Thank you. I think this is a wonderful idea, and Jan, we should do that. We should do this women initiative. I want it. It's wonderful. We do that. Okay, one more question, please. Oh, very much in the end. By the way, you do use the room really well spread out. Okay.
Hi, thanks. I have a question regarding the seed stage funding. Something that's growing lately that I've been reading about, the convertible bonds, the convertible debt. What do you think about the convertible debt at the seed stage? Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, we do convertible structures also for later stage companies, but of course in the seed stage it's about speed of execution. You just want to be fast with documentation. To go through an equity structuring it just takes longer time, right? It's much quicker to do a convertible that then converts into the next round, and then you really let the progress of the entrepreneur decide what's the pricing also in the next round. So it's just much simpler, much faster to do the convertible.
Converts are good. Andrin, what do you think?
I think, look, as investors, of course, we prefer to know what we're actually investing in and how much we own of a business when we invest. So for me, it depends on what risk you're taking, for how long that convertible is likely to stay out there, and therefore what the difference in risk is that the ultimate next round investor is taking versus what you're taking as the convertible investor. I think it's very hard to generalize. I do think in some cases it's a good instrument. We're using it. We have certainly invested in convertibles, especially in existing portfolio companies who do follow-on rounds. And I think in smaller, really early angel rounds where maybe you're trying not to complicate matters, it's a good thing. But obviously as investors, as I think it's self-evident, it's not our favorite instrument.
It's better for angels than it is for institutional investors.
Okay. Unless anyone disagrees, herewith we conclude NOAH15 London. We are very happy about everybody's attendance, especially the ones who bared with us to the very beginning of our networking drinks.